In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Andrew and Jerry Save the World, episode 15. Andrew and Jerry, actually, we're not even going to call this. It's Andrew and Jerry's quarterly political review. We're going to be doing a bunch of these. We're going to be doing them once a quarter now through the midterms, and then again going up to the presidential election in 2024, probably beyond that as well. I'm Andrew Langer.
I'm Jerry Rogers.
Jerry Rogers, who now calmed down. Jerry's getting a little,
well, I'm always a little up, aren't I?
So yeah, well, no. I mean, it's just you seem anyway. We'll talk about your Eeyorishness in a moment. You've got a lot to be Eeyorish about right now. We're going to be joined in a couple of minutes by Amber Athey, who many of you will know is the Washington editor of the Spectator. Also was most recently employed by Cumulus Media at WMAL, working with our good friend Larry O'Connor on his show, O'Connor and Company. We're going to talk to her about what's gone down over there, but also to get her perspective on a whole host of issues. And really, that's what this is all about. This is a catch-all episode, kind of like we're going to take Rip from the Headlines. In fact, maybe I'll delay starting Rip from the Headlines until later on. We'll do it when Amber comes on in our expert advice segment. But we got a lot going on in the world, don't we, Jerry?
Well, of course. I mean, we have the Democrats taking credit for a thriving economy, and what's interesting about that is that we've had 7 consecutive months of no wage growth. We've had historic inflation.
Time out for a second. All right. Do you believe these jobs numbers?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no. We had on Brian Darling on the Jerry Rogers show over at WBAL, and he talked about something that we used to talk about but haven't recently, and that is workers are just dropping out of the labor force.
Yeah, the labor force participation rate.
Exactly right, and it's again at historic lows. But here's the most important number when it comes to job growth, and that is, remember, we had the great firing. All the lockdowns and restrictions, especially on Main Street, mom and pop jobs, restaurants, entrepreneurs, small business owners, were essentially just told to go home and stop working.
Yes.
And so we're now coming back. There is great revival, so to speak, vis-a-vis the COVID lockdowns. But the problem is, and here's something to remember, we are still hundreds of thousands of jobs short of pre-pandemic.
Yes, well,
and that's the real number.
Millions of jobs short.
Yes, I mean, that's exactly right.
This is the thing that gets me, and why the numbers in my mind don't quite jibe, and why it's interesting to talk about, right, the payroll numbers versus what's called the labor participation rate, which is this idea of, what the Labor Department does is they do a household survey, and they literally call folks and they ask them if they've been employed, right? And part of it is, the great thing about the labor participation rate is that it gets at folks who have gig economies and those who are self-employed and all of those things. And if those numbers, if the labor participation numbers are lower than the payroll numbers, right? When you call businesses and you ask them how many are on their payroll, this gives you a much more accurate survey. What gets me, and something that I've been thinking about quite a bit, Jerry, and the reason why stuff doesn't jibe for me is the fact that we have, as you were just talking about, we have wages being stagnant. If the jobs numbers were as high as they are, right, and we have all of these companies that are looking for workers, then you would see the wage numbers go up, which is, and frankly, exactly what we did see during the Trump administration. In 2017 and 2018, we saw that all happen. We saw real wages go up. We saw both the payroll numbers and the labor participation rate numbers go up. And so it was one of those, it was a situation in which you had real organic economic growth, and it was chartable. The fact that I see businesses, and I don't know about how it is where you live, Jerry, but I have businesses still shut down. And I know some folks are going to say, well, if they can't find labor, it's because the labor market is scarce. No, it's because actually, let me get back to something that doesn't jibe for me, Jerry. If all of these businesses were coming back and all of these jobs numbers were accurate and we were getting the same kind of growth, right? If we were having a 1-for-1 replacement of workers, we would not be seeing all of these businesses searching for work. Now, all of these businesses are searching for employees. And
Sure.
all I could think, listen, I can wear my tinfoil hat and say, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna say it like this. Where did these workers go? Right? It's not that they are
Right.
all hired elsewhere. And the other part of this, Jerry, right, is if the economy were really doing as well as it is, then we wouldn't be seeing the Obama, I almost said Obama administration, the Biden administration, turning around and for instance, delaying the restarting of college debt payments, student loan debt repayments.
Sure.
They would be getting back.
Well, look,
sorry, go ahead.
There are a couple things here. Number one, real wages are declining. That's the fact.
Well, sure.
Real wages are declining, and also real disposable income has declined. In fact, it's been declining every month over the past a year. Those are real numbers, and that's why, again, the Democrats, the administration must really understand how the media is in their corner, because they can tweet out, they can, from the White House podium, the president can go and talk to labor workers and just flat out tell untruths.
Yeah.
And the media just has their back. I'm reminded again, Judiciary Chairman Senator Durbin this week on the floor of the Senate in the Judiciary Committee, saying things like Justice Jackson, now Supreme Court Justice Jackson, was lied about. Her treatment was unfair, as if he just completely misremembers Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and Justice Gorsuch.
And frankly, his own, not even talking about Supreme Court justices, but his own behavior in terms of harassing organizations.
Right, but my point in both these situations, both Justice Jackson, Judge Jackson, but also the economy, is there is no fourth estate. There is no media holding elected officials accountable.
This is the thing you and I talked about yesterday, which was this thing in Chicago, Ann Applebaum and Judd Legum. At this event, talking about, in fact, I want to hold off on talking about the Biden, the Hunter Biden laptop thing for a second, because I want to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you a policy question, and it's something I want to talk about after we have Amber Athey on, and maybe we have to have a whole show to this. But someone said something to me with regards to this whole student loan debt repayment issue. Why are we talking about student loan debt forgiveness? If the Democrats really want to seize on something, and I'm saying this to you, Jerry, because you're the editor of Real Clear Health, how come we're not talking about medical debt forgiveness in the face of for cancer patients or those who are getting treatment for terminal illnesses? I mean,
this is, but also you can widen it out. Why aren't we talking about all of the private practices that went under or almost went under, but for, remember, the Trump administration, the Health and Human Services, HHS, had a program where it worked in tandem with other parts of the administration, USDA and other parts of the administration, where they did two things. Number one, they expanded broadband to allow for an explosion of telehealth, digital health, right? Number one. Number two, what they did was something called the Provider Relief Fund. And that is, if you were a physician's group and you were told no more elective surgeries, no more health care, this fund, a public fund, but with private partners, saved private market medicine in this country. So my point is we should be talking about this. Why aren't we forgiving the debts and the physician money's lost and all the rest of it?
It gets to something you and I talked about during at the height of the pandemic.
Well, you know the answer to that, by the way. You already know the answer.
Yeah, which is, go ahead.
Which is they want to write this big celebratory White House briefing this week where Obama came back to celebrate the Affordable Care Act. Again, the media in their back pocket, the Affordable Care Act, skyrocketing premiums,
Yep.
Millions of Americans lost their doctors and lost their coverage, and yet they have the audacity to celebrate it. What it did do was expand the roles of Medicaid. That's what Obamacare did.
It was a situation, right, in which, and we said this, at the 5-year anniversary of the Affordable Care Act, right? If your metric is how many people are insured, right?
Sure.
Then which is an insane metric, right? It is a metric that has no bearing on the healthcare provision to Americans. But if you're going to essentially, you are going to mandate that people buy a product, right? You have to buy this under penalty of law. But if you can't afford it, we're going to give you a massive subsidy, or we're going to give it to you for free, then it's not any great shakes. It's not some kind of policy success if more people get the product that you're either mandating, subsidizing, or giving away for free. Yes. Right? If more people don't get that product, well, then you clearly we're doing something wrong. But that is absolutely. Listen, Jerry,
there is this alarming trend.
Jerry, it's like a boss. Anyway, I was going
to make but there is this alarming trend in medicine in our healthcare system where we see reform, true reform, only if it's a public sector action. And again, all the great reforms in the last 15 years, 20 years have been public-private partnerships where the private sector, discipline, competition, innovation, partners with the subsidies needed in some instances and safety net needed in many instances. And the reason why we're not seeing the health sector rescued, so to speak, from the Biden administration, or them even talking about it, is because they want a full takeover. They want a Canadian style, UK style medicine in this country. And what's dangerous about that is, again, talk to a sick person from Canada or the UK, and they'll tell you they don't get care. There's no access to medicine, no access to innovative cures or new therapies. And if talk to a healthy person, they love it. Talk to a sick person, and they're terrified. But that's what they want to bring to the U.S.
Yeah, 100%, without a doubt. It is not about it. And as we predicted, incidentally, it's not about getting people medical care. And as we had talked about, all of the things that were driving physicians out of the practice of medicine are continuing to happen. And it's the problem has just gotten worse.
Look, I mean, Vox, which is a left center political journal, had an excellent piece 2 or 3 days ago talking about how there's a massive shortage of medical workers, in particular physicians and nurses. Yes. I mean, this is a real problem.
And it's funny because I've talked about this. I've tweeted about it. We spent a little bit of time on the radio talking about this. And I'll tell you what's not going to solve the problem. I'll make a bold statement.
Joe Biden.
Well, yes, that's true. But you have these things called PAs, physician's assistants.
Yes.
Who now want to be called assistant physicians or associate physicians. And that's not going to solve the problem. In fact, that'll make it worse. Tell you what, Jerry, it's time for our expert advice segment. So let's go and bring on Amber Athey.
Excellent.
Expert advice.
Well, welcome to our expert advice segment. Actually, we're going to combine them today. So right now, you're also going to hear us say we're also going to do our Rip from the Headlines segment.
Ripped from the headlines.
And joining us today to do both our headlines and our expert, to get our expert advice, is Amber Athey. Amber is the Washington editor of The Spectator. Up until very recently, was a host with WMAL in Washington, D.C. on a show called O'Connor and Company with our good friend Larry O'Connor, as well as our friend Julie Gunlock. And Amber, listen, before we get into the whole story here, we actually want to open this up. You wrote a really great piece this week about being in a sport and competing against guys. This is something Jerry and I have talked about long before the latest controversy with University
talking about Amber and her competing in sports. What do you mean?
Well, Amber, go ahead.
Well, the piece was about my experience in club field hockey at Georgetown University. And for people who aren't familiar, club is basically in between intramural and D1. So it's sort of middle of the road. You still compete against other schools, and there's a national championship every year, but it's not as competitive and doesn't have the funding stream that Division I sports have. But still, you know, really fun time. I was the president of the club field hockey team. And what was really interesting and what kind of informed a lot of my opinions about the transgender women in sports debate is that we actually had men on our team. And it was rather unusual. I think we were actually the only sport, or at least the only club sport, that had mixed gender. And the reason being is that field hockey is very popular overseas for men.
Really?
Like in Ireland and Australia, men's teams are very common and really, really popular. So we had a lot of international students, and so Georgetown and other, you know, schools in the area and the National Club Field Hockey Association decided to let men play on the team. And usually we would end up actually getting guys from the US who were cut from other sports and just wanted to like hang out with girls and keep playing sports. But what was interesting about it is we had some pretty specific rules as to how many guys were allowed to be on the field at a time. And you were only allowed to have 2 on the field at any given moment during the game. And then sometimes you would even have to cut that back to 1, depending on how many guys the other team had. And we always had these conversations with the guys before we actually played in our games about safety too, because it was pretty common where newer guys to the sport didn't really understand just how faster and stronger they were than the women. So they'd be charging down the field with the ball and just like knocking girls out, like trucking them, because the girls weren't really agile enough to know how to get out of the way.
Wow.
So,
go ahead.
So, I mean, it underscores that regardless of whether or not you are a Supreme Court justice nominee who can't define a woman, that there are, listen, even if you're not a biologist, if you are just a guy playing, you know, club level field hockey, you understand the difference between men and women, don't you?
It's super obvious. And none of us were trying to make a political statement by saying that only 2 guys could be on the field at a time. It was a safety issue. It was a competition issue. And we had guys that would, like I said, come over after being cut from club soccer, for example.
Yeah.
And they would have never played field hockey before in their life. They'd pick up a stick, be super awkward for maybe 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden they were the best player on the team. It was just inevitable because their base athletic ability is so far beyond that of a woman. And it was so obvious to everyone involved that it kind of blows my mind that this is even a debate that people are having.
It's interesting to me because I've long said, right, so understanding that the NCAA is an association that deals with collegiate level sports, we now know that the prevailing wisdom, and for those of you who are listening, I'm putting wisdom in air quotes, the prevailing wisdom on university campuses is that there are more than 2 genders, however you want to define those. I don't understand why these universities themselves, being driven by woke politics, aren't calling for the NCAA to institute a whole new categories of genders for sports. I mean, if what they're saying is factual, they believe that it's factual and that it should be the prevailing norm, then they should be creating these categories. Anyway, your thoughts on this?
Well, I have a little bit of insight into this actually, because the current chair of the NCAA commission, as I understand it, is the president of Georgetown University, which is where I went to school.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. His name is John DeJoya, and he is sort of an expert at caving to woke mobs. This is that's his history as a president, really. He was the president when I was there from 2012 to 2016, and there were a whole host of issues that you would never expect a Catholic university to get involved in. And he was just constantly like, all right, sure, have whatever you want, just please don't protest. That's the way that he responds to people being upset with him, is to just give in. So it's not really all that surprising that he would be involved in this. And then I think it's a similar answer for other university administrators as well. They've never really learned how to deal with the temper tantrums that the woke students on campus throw. They don't understand that if they give in, they're not actually appeasing them, they're incentivizing them to continue that type of behavior.
And that's true in corporate culture. That's true in radio. We'll get to that. But it's funny, Andrew knows this, but I coach high school sports. And so I've coached women's track and field. I've coached men's track and field. I've coached football. And a couple years ago, we had a young lady, a freshman, come out for the team, and we were a small school, Catholic school, and so the athletic director asked me to make an exception and let her come on. She weighed 80 pounds, and she was much smaller and slower than even her freshman peers. And what happened was we had to be careful how we did it, because we wanted to be honest with her, but also encourage her to want to participate and be part of a team. And I couldn't figure out if she was doing this because she loved football or because she wanted to make some kind of statement. And so, and everything's political today, but we quickly discovered that she was in jeopardy every time she was not just on the field playing a game, which she would never do until the fourth quarter, and then she'd be in a position on the kickoff, and somewhere where we could literally tell other kids to protect her. But in practice during drills, it was a hazard. And also in track and field, the girls and the boys, we practice together. And there is
I ran track too.
Yeah, and there's a great rivalry sometimes where the girls want to beat the boys and boys want to beat the girls, sort of a thing. But in 10 years of coaching track and field, I've only had one female athlete who was the best athlete in terms of all around athleticism, but still couldn't beat our best boy in the 100, the 200, or the 400. And again, it's this point where those who aren't coaching, those not engaged, those who don't have to care about the safety and the well-being of their athletes, we get this. It's the administrators and those in position of power. And I want to say one, I'm hogging this, but I got a comment about Georgetown. So
hold on, time out for a second, Amber. I'm waiting for this because Jerry and I have a daughter who was very interested in Georgetown, and Jerry had some very pointed thoughts. About Georgetown.
And God bless you. I'm a Fordham guy. I went to Fordham University.
I'm probably going to agree with everying that you say.
Well, I mean,
I don't give Georgetown any money.
So I graduated a very long time before you, and I got into Georgetown, got into Fordham. I wanted to go to Fordham. I'm from the city. I'm a Bronx guy. I wanted to go to the Fordham. My mother was furious with me. She wanted me to go to Georgetown. Anyway, long story short, the Catholic schools, all my kids have gone to Catholic school, Catholic grammar school, Catholic high school, Catholic college. I have two daughters now at Catholic University. Anyway, but we wanted to check out Georgetown. It's local. It's a good Jesuit school. I like the Jesuits still. Even though I shouldn't, I still like them. But here's the thing, and I want to comment on this, or not comment. So we went to visit Georgetown, and Georgetown is a beautiful campus, and it has wonderful history, and alum and all the rest of it. But you know what the first thing they showed us when we came to campus? The very first thing.
Let her guess, Jerry, because I bet she gets it on a guess. Amber, what do you think they showed on the first?
Oh God, that's a good question.
Given what we've been talking about,
the basketball stadium.
They showed us the very first thing. They brought us to the transgender dorms.
What?
Yes. We went to a dorm that
Here,
was
all of you good Catholics who want to come and join the Georgetown Jesuit
it was the very
tradition.
Oh my God!
It was the very first thing.
I will say that did not exist when I was there. I don't know
wow.
if somebody complained, but
it was a dorm that was set aside for transgendered students or allies. But I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, like, all the other parents were like, "Oh, this is wonderful." And the thing is, it wasn't like it was a great dorm. We were in like a kitchen that hadn't been cleaned. It was like you know how they have suites, and on the floor there's a kitchen. It was one of those things, and it was a mess. And I remember raising my hand and saying, "All right, I'm sorry. This is it. This is the first place you take us to a kitchen that wasn't clean last night in a transgender dorm." And I looked around the other parents. I'm like, "Am I the only one who finds it strange?" And then my daughter was mortified, but
sure.
Regardless, but it goes to the point where everything is political, and we've kind of lost ourselves. And I'll be
Amber,
quiet.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
Go
just
ahead.
mind blown because there were definitely no transgender dorms when I was at Georgetown. Otherwise, I probably would have been like arrested for protesting them. But
So-
I mean, that's the thing. Georgetown's not really. It's Catholic. We call it Catholic in name only because
Oh,
they don't
you know.
actually abide by any of the things we're supposed to believe in.
So okay, so you graduate, you're in DC. Let's open it up. Let's talk about this. You're working for, where were you before you were at the Spectator? Where were you?
I was at the Daily Caller for
That's it.
about 3 years.
Yeah, it's because someone had said to me, a colleague in DC, I said that I was having you on. I'm like, oh, she was at the Daily Caller. No, she's at the Spectator now, and hadn't heard the news. How did you link up with our good friend Larry? This whole O'Connor, as we said, good friends with Julie Gunlock as well. Jerry and I both worked with her for a long time.
And also, I mean, Derek Hunter was at the Daily Caller, and Tucker.
Yeah.
Tucker was one of the founders, right? Of
and
of the
Derek's
Daily Caller.
husband Heather is someone.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Jerry and I both. Yeah. Anyway, so go ahead. So you're out there. How did this all happen? How did you wind up over at WMAL?
I actually started guest hosting about 3 years ago, back when I was still at the Daily Caller, because Vince Colonnese, who now hosts the afternoon show, was on mornings with Mary Walter.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And when Mary would have, vacation or sick days, I would sometimes come in and fill in for her. And that was how I first got affiliated with MAL. And then this past winter, when they flipped around the schedule and put Vince in the afternoon and were moving Larry to the mornings, they had this idea where they wanted to have a couple of rotating co-hosts on with Larry, and they knew that they wanted a couple of women or 3 women. They didn't know exactly how it was going to be structured yet. So they had a few of us, I think maybe 5 to 10 women, come in and guest host over the course of about 3 to 6 months. And I was brought in on that because, of course, I had already been guest hosting a decent amount. And around the summer, they started to finalize that they thought it was going to be 3 people. There were going to be 2 women doing 2 days a week, 1 woman doing 1 day a week. And October 1st, I think, was our official start date. So I was the Wednesday, Thursday morning co-host. Julie, your friend, was Monday, Tuesday, and Patrice Onwuka's Friday. And that was our rotating schedule that we would do every week.
Yeah, we've had. I've also had Patrice on my show. I think Jerry's had her on his show as well.
Well, Julie has been on my show a couple times.
Yeah. So Julie Gunlock, who has, I think, one of the best names in media. In
it's a really good name.
Although I will say this, Amber has never been a guest on my show, and I feel very insulted by this.
Oh yeah. By the way,
we're gonna have to fix that.
Jerry wants you to be on his show on Sunday, but we'll get to that.
Some Sunday, yes, of course.
Yes. But so okay. So we know, Jerry, how do I want to say this as diplomatically as possible?
Then don't let me say it.
No, we'll ask you this question. So we know from other folks that there has been in corporate structures with corporate talk radio. Now, WMAL is I'm going to say a legacy conservative talk station. It is a station known for its conservative talk. We know that successful conservative talk can sometimes be controversial. We know that the best talk radio comes from people having opinions and sticking to those opinions and wanting to talk to those opinions. But we also know that in corporate America and with corporate-driven radio, there are now new pressures that are being put on them. Before this all happened, were you guys having any discussions with folks, I will say, above the production level about content and tone,
and social media and
social? Well, we'll get to the social media in a minute. I want to talk about the on-air content for a moment.
All right.
Yeah, so I don't know how much I can say without getting sued. So
I'll speak in rather defamatory.
I'll speak in rather vague terms.
Yes, of course.
I never heard anything directly from corporate, and I think that's by nature of me being a part-time co-host.
That makes sense.
But we did occasionally hear things from people within the MAL building, and specifically there was some talk about how we were supposed to present vaccines, for example, or how we were supposed
I wish I had a bell.
But I kind of played ignorant because since I didn't have those conversations directly with corporate, I would just kind of pretend that I didn't hear anything. So if you go back and listen to the way that I talked about the vaccines on air, I don't think it was probably in keeping with what they really wanted.
Well,
But I never got in trouble for it. Nobody ever said anything to me, so I just kept doing it.
yeah, Jerry, I know we don't want to talk about our own experiences here. At least I don't. But given that my co-host is the editor of Real Clear Health, my co-host here on the show is the editor of Real Clear Health. One thinks that he would have a great understanding of the breadth of the subject. Now, I'm listen, in addition to my radio stuff, I've got a background in academics. I've got a background in public policy. So I tend to talk with, in detail about such issues, as does Jerry. So that's really interesting. So what about this? Jerry asked about social media policy. What were you told about social media?
Well, I knew there was a policy. Everybody gets a corporate employee handbook when they sign their contract, and I read it, and it seemed like it probably wouldn't apply to me. I mean, the only portion of the social media policy that seems, I suppose, like you could even possibly violate it by accident, because like everything else, you have to be kind of an idiot to violate certain parts of the social media policy, right? Like it has to be very obviously horrible, whatever you said. Sure. But there's one portion of it that is intentionally vague so that they have cover basically to fire you if they don't like what you tweet.
So that's the part where it says you just can't be funny.
Yeah, you can't make jokes.
No humor.
But it says something along the lines of, you can't say anything that brings like reputational harm to yourself or to the company or something. So that's like a CYA kind of policy that they threw in there so that they can fire you for cause, even if you didn't break any of the actual real policies that they're talking about.
So you could say I'm a Red Sox fan, and that brings great shame upon you in the state and the station, and you'd lose your job.
Listen, something. I'll say this, Jerry. Right? I mean, if you were at, let's say you were at a radio station in New York, and you tweeted out that you were a Red Sox fan, I'm wondering if that might apply here. That's
we'll
I think
give
it could probably apply to anything, because that's a totally subjective judgment about reputational harm, of course.
Amber, where are you from?
I'm from Frederick, Maryland.
You are.
Hey,
oh, no kidding. So all my kids go to St. John's Catholic Prep in Buckystown.
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar. I had a lot of friends that went there.
I'm actually supposed to be hosting a gubernatorial primary.
You're not going to do it. It's on Good Friday.
On Good Friday, so it
shouldn't be doing it on Good Friday. You should be home,
being good. Yes,
repenting of your sins.
Well, instead, I'll be serving penance by moderating the gubernatorial.
Only because I'm interested in where folks are from. So, may I ask what high school you went to?
I went to Walkersville High School.
Oh, very good. Okay, excellent. Mm-hmm. All right. So
is that a public school?
It is.
It is public.
Yes. Oh yeah, because you'll get Jerry started on his rants about public school in a second.
Well, they're not great.
I'll say this though, because we've been a DC centric family. So I was at Pharma. I worked for a member of Congress. So we're in Upper Montgomery County, and so but since we've been here, we moved from North Jersey. We've been DC centric, so that's where we went out to dinner. This is where I went to work and all the rest of it. And then with how the economy has changed, and I went into consulting and radio and all the rest of it, I do most of that, all of my policy work and writing. I do it from home. And then though I started to coach, and so we kind of shifted, and we're now very Frederick centric. And I'll say this for our listeners who are in Maryland: I think Frederick's a great little city. Restaurants and the main avenues there. They have 2 record shops where I've been able to find vintage of first prints of some great albums. So Frederick's cool. I like Frederick very much.
Yeah, I really enjoyed growing up there.
Yeah,
I really did.
It's good. So okay. Now, from what I understand, right, if I'm understanding the story correctly, it wasn't even this tweet. The tweet about Kamala Harris.
Well, can we? Why don't you set the context? What was the tweet? And go ahead, Andrew.
Well, this is when I'm going to get to this, Jerry.
Right, very good.
It was not that tweet. It was not that tweet that got her fired. It was not that tweet that brought the initial ire, right, Amber? Oh, I'm sorry. You're right, Jerry. So Amber tweets out a tweet of a picture of Kamala Harris at the Vice President of the United States at the State of the Union wearing this brown outfit. And Amber, right? You said she looks. Did you say she looks like a UPS driver, or did you just say?
So I didn't have a picture of her attached to the tweet, and maybe that was my mistake because I left the door open for people to
misinterpret.
You're not a prop comic,
but it was an intentional misinterpretation. So I don't even like to say like people misunderstood the tweet because they did it on purpose. It's not like people misunderstood what I was saying, but the tweet was sent during the State of the Union. I mean, you can look at the timestamp and the date on it. It's very obvious what I was talking about. And it was, I have it pretty much down to memory at this point because I've repeated it so many times over the past week, but it's, no, it's fine. Kamala looks like a UPS employee. What can Brown do for you? Nothing good, apparently, was the tweet. That was it.
And again, that is a slogan. It's a famous slogan.
And UPS complained to you because you dared suggest that Kamala Harris was a UPS driver.
Yeah, if anything, it's insulting to UPS to think that Kamala could do their job.
And I thought maybe it could also be construed as a Willie Brown joke, but that,
no.
Some people have pointed that out to me, and unfortunately, I am apparently not that clever, but I think that's hilarious.
Well, just time out for a second. Before we get into this, I mean, that was a really strange State of the Union in a lot of ways. And because I came in for some crap, I tweeted out, do you remember there was that moment, Amber, where Nancy Pelosi gets up and does this weird fist bump? Yeah, that's it, the fist rub shimmy thing. Yeah. And I tweeted out and I went and found, I actually went back.
We live in ridiculous times.
I filmed it with my phone on the TV and then tweeted out that, and I got a tremendous amount of crap from a Hollywood guy who was very upset that I dared sort of suggest there was something weird about that very weird shimmy. But so it was a very strange State of the Union as it was. So, okay, so you tweeted that out, but that's not what got you in trouble, is it? There was another tweet that someone complained about, and then somebody went back through your tweets.
What?
Yeah, so what happened was, I mean, initially the Kamala tweet performed fine. Like, it definitely didn't go viral or anything. It wasn't one of my most insanely liked tweets.
In fact, very little attention was, I mean, relatively speaking, it was.
I think it had maybe 700 likes. I mean, like nothing crazy. And then a couple of replies of people being like, "Oh, that's so funny." And then a couple of days later, there was this situation going on at the University of North Texas, and I really want to like get into what's going on here because this is the longest program that I've actually been on, so I can fully explain it.
Take your time.
Yes. So the University of North Texas, there's a student there by the name of Kelly Neidert. I think that's how you say her last name. And I had written about this previously, actually, about the fact that she was harassed by students for printing out flyers for this event that she was hosting through the Young Conservatives of Texas.
Yes.
And the event that she was hosting was with a guy named Jeff Younger. And Jeff Younger is running for the Texas State House.
Yes.
As a Republican, and he's running on the issue of medical transitions for transgender children. And this is a very personal issue for him because he actually lost custody of his son because his ex-wife had convinced the courts that the son was actually a daughter. And she was dressing him up in dresses and trying to get this child to transition. The father was against all of this, and so he ended up losing custody.
And under circumstances, right, at a different time, this would have been grounds for the mother to lose custody. But let's not even go there. Go ahead. Yeah.
So the University of North Texas, the conservatives there wanted to have Jeff Younger on campus to speak about this issue, and they were printing out flyers that said, I think something like ban transgender. It wasn't even that mean. It was less mean than that. I'm trying to remember exactly what it said. It was something about banning transitions for trans kids, something like that. People freaked out, had a meltdown. I wrote about it because the UNT president actually sent out an email chastising the conservatives for printing out these flyers and being hateful, blah, blah, blah. A few days later, they have the event, and there's a huge, massive protest. And at the end of the night, it gets so bad that police have to escort this student, Kelly, and Jeff Younger off of campus in their police cars. Kelly's like hiding in a broom closet at one point because people are yelling at her and threatening her and chasing her. The police car finally gets them in and is leaving campus. There's a whole horde of students that try to like jump in front of the police car to stop it. And the police car ends up hitting one of them.
Oh my
and so,
goodness.
of course, naturally, that becomes the left headline. Is,
Oh,
oh my God, the police ran over a transgender student,
Oh,
completely
boy.
missing all of the context leading up to this.
Sure.
So now we get to the Twitter battle. There's a guy named Stephen Monticelli, who is a freelance journalist for Daily Beast, Yahoo News, Rolling Stone, and he's been covering this issue pretty heavily, and he's very activist-y. He actually wrote a piece for the Daily Beast about the college students who were putting this on. It was like a hit piece about college students, which I thought is really weird and not very journalistic-y at all.
Sure, yes.
So he gets in an argument with Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire.
Okay.
And Matt Walsh sort of infamously like against transgenderism.
Yes, of course.
And
Well, he's traveled the world trying to figure out the definition of what a woman is.
Yeah, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So he was responding to Stephen Monticelli, and I was familiar with this guy from writing about the UNT situation, and I responded to it something like, this guy's a creep, he's writing about college students, it's weird. And Stephen Monticelli jumps in and starts talking about how the police ran over a transgender kid, and it just spirals into this debate about the idea of like putting kids on puberty blockers or surgical interventions, all this crazy stuff that we would normally call child abuse.
Right.
Well, his followers start going through all of my tweets and are like, nope, this girl's got to go. We don't like her. They find the Kamala tweet, they screenshot it, they send it to Stephen Monticelli, who promptly posted on his Twitter page to his tens of thousands of followers, saying that it's racist because the "What can Brown do for you" comment was obviously about Kamala's skin color, not her outfit. And that was the impetus for people then sending the tweet to my employers, both at the Spectator and at MAL, specifically the ownership, Cumulus Media. And that was sort of where all of the backlash began, was over this transgender issue that wasn't even related to the State of the Union tweet at all. They just were searching for something that they could use against me, and that ended up being the thing that they found.
And how long did it take from when they sent Cumulus the screenshotted Kamala Harris tweet for you to get the phone call? And was there any conversation beforehand about this so you could talk to them about this, explain the context, maybe sort of figure out a way well short of firing you for making a funny tweet that got 700 likes, by the way?
Yeah, so that's another weird part of the story, because the backlash on Twitter lasted for maybe 2 days, if that. I mean, in terms of like social media scandals, it was a pretty light one, in my opinion. I've had people come after me before. This was like nothing. But that was on March 3rd and 4th, I think, that they were sending emails. And I can't imagine they got more than like a dozen, if that, because the Spectator, my main employer, got one email.
Yeah.
So like, how many did Cumulus get? 2, maybe?
Yeah, right.
Well, it all blew over, so I thought by Monday everything was fine, except that Wednesday I hosted the program and nobody thought anything was off or amiss. And later that afternoon, around 3 or 4 o'clock, I got a phone call with a 202 number, which is a DC area code. Usually when I get a number like that, I'm like, oh, it's like somebody from Congress or something, you know, some comms director. And they told me that it was Jeff Bowden, who's the vice president of DC Cumulus operations.
Yeah.
And then the other woman on the call was Kristen Fancelis, who is vice president for HR. And as soon as I heard HR, I was like, oh, shoot, that's it. Yeah. I'm in trouble for something.
By the way, you can curse. You can say shit if you want to.
Okay, great.
But my mother's watching now. So
yeah, your mother, I think, would agree that in this case, saying "oh shit" would probably be the right way.
Yeah, my mom's probably watching too, but I'll keep it. I'll keep it G. It's okay. Yeah. So I knew that something was wrong, but I still didn't think that I was going to be fired. So they brought up the tweet and they said, we were alerted to this tweet that you made, and we can't have racism. And I was like, what?
Okay, good. Yeah, I agree. We can't have racism.
Yeah, I was like, all right.
This was not a racist tweet. So end of story. Great. Yes.
And they said, and unfortunately, this has violated our social media policy. And they also brought up the fact that I was like mocking the people who were trying to cancel me, because I I think cancellation efforts are so stupid that, and I didn't think that anybody was going to take the Kamala tweet seriously as racist. So I was like, oh, try to cancel me, contact my employers, do what you do, like good luck, basically. I was egging them on. I mean, whatever.
Sure.
So they said that the Kamala tweet was racist, the follow-ups were a violation of social media policy, and that I was terminated effective immediately. Wow. And I was like, whoa. This tweet was about Kamala Harris's outfit. You realize that, right? And they clearly had some type of like corporate HR script because they wouldn't actually respond to anything that I was trying to interject. And they just said, okay, so we're going to get you set up with your last pay stub, and our relationship ends like right here, right now. You're terminated effective immediately. You don't come back tomorrow. That's it. And I said, after they were done reading their little corporate spiel, can I make a parting statement for the record? Because I think it's really important that you have some record of my opinion on this and what's going on. And they said, sure. And I didn't think they were going to actually listen to me, but I just felt like I had to do it. So for about 3 or 4 minutes, I just like went off and I talked about the context behind the tweet. I talked about how they were damaging the integrity of the station by giving into this, how they were incentivizing future campaigns against their hosts, how we spent so much of our programming warning against the excesses of wokeness and cancel culture. I mean, how we gave platform to the Virginia parents who were labeled domestic terrorists by the Biden administration. And this is in the same vein as that. And just tried to make my voice heard the only way I really knew how in that moment. And when I was done, they just said, okay, thank you, goodbye. And that was it. I was done.
I mean, it really does underscore, and I think you're absolutely correct in this regard, right? In that it incentivizes the woke mob. Now, here's the interesting thing. Let me ask you this, and this is, listen, I don't want to sort of revisit I don't want to. I think calling it trauma is probably not the right word, but did your cancelers do a victory lap on social media?
So I actually didn't go public with it immediately. There was a month where I was speaking to some lawyers, and also the other hosts at WMAL were really horrified by what happened. And really, we were just trying to get my job back. So I know there were a lot of meetings, a lot of emails sent, phone calls, etc. And I wanted to let the other hosts kind of do their thing and see what happened, because I thought, if they won't listen to me, they have these amazing talents who have been with the station for years now, and maybe they'll listen to them. They'll have the respect to listen to them, but nothing moved them. Nothing changed the decision. So that was when I decided to actually share that this had happened. And to answer your question, yes, there are a lot of people celebrating, and
they want scalps. As Brad Pitt says in Inglourious Bastards, they're gonna get their scalps. I mean, listen, I one of the things that buoys me, at the very least, and it's small comfort, and I want to be really clear about this, is I'm just glad that the other hosts rallied together in your defense and in your support. I think that kind of internal courage is rare, especially in light of the fact that what this demonstrates is, now I don't know if, and I'm sure you don't want to get into this, I don't know if it's because, folks feel more secure because they're full-time and under contract versus you being a part-timer. But I know that there are other environments and other media environments in which a fellow host gets fired and nobody says, or very few people say anything behind the scenes. Jerry, did you want to say something?
Well, I mean, a couple of things, and Andrew can give witness to this, and that is, I hope you stick on this. I hope that you keep on punching back. I hope you're doing this 6 weeks from now, a year from now. I think anyone involved in your firing, their name should be mud, frankly. I think that the vice president of the station of Cumulus, I think his name should become synonymous with cowardice. And in fact, I've read your piece on.
Sorry, go ahead.
But give witness, Andrew. Andrew and I get into it where I want to stay on a topic often, and Andrew likes to move on, like he's trying to do right now, and I won't let him.
No. I don't know. I don't want to move on, Jerry. I want to get clarification. Hold on. I have a point of clarification. Do you think this was something that was decided at the DC level, or was this decided above the DC level in Cumulus? Because Jerry, this gets into what we're talking about in terms of general corporate structures and corporate characters. Do you think that this was something above the level of the DC VP for operations, or was it just in the DC cluster?
I think that it was higher than them.
Yeah.
But we still don't know to this day
Sure.
who actually made the decision. That's something that we really spent the last month trying to figure out, and really just have had no transparency. But by all indications, this was a corporate decision, because nobody at the show or any of the other programming directors at MAL knew that this was coming, and were really as shocked by it as I was. And let me just say, to the point about making his name mud, I 100% agree. And that was kind of my sort of thinking about why I wanted to go public with this. I mean, there are tons of reasons why. Like, cancel culture is terrible. People need to be made aware of what's going on.
Stand up for what's right.
I can
Stand
do
up for the
something
truth
about it.
Yeah.
But also the fact that they use this social media policy about reputational damage to the company and to myself, my thought was, okay, you thought a couple of emails from people who don't even listen to WMAL is reputational damage. Like, I'll show you reputational damage. Let's do that. Let's play that game. And I will tar and feather you in front of every conservative who listens to you.
Let's take you out of the equation and what you might do out of the equation, right? I mean, let's just get to this idea of, right, because this is something that Jerry and I talk about with regards to public policy generally, which is people do things because they think they're going to have X effect, and then they don't think about the unintended consequences. So what you're saying is a station like Cumulus thinks that, or I'm sorry, a company like Cumulus thinks that there is reputational damage when they get, let's say, a half dozen emails, or even a dozen emails about a tweet that you've done, and maybe some guy from the far left writing about it. And I was making typewriter fingers with my hands. What they don't understand is when they fire you, right, even if you were not to go out and do something, the story is out there. Amber Athey gets fired for making a funny tweet about Kamala Harris's outfit at the State of the Union. That is legitimate. There's legitimate reputational damage to Cumulus that comes from that. And then, right, the ancillary impact, if the other hosts, and we don't have to go through them by name, but if the other hosts are then afraid to either engage in the marketing side of things by getting involved in social media and not being funny on social media, because I don't know if Cumulus has ever checked, but Larry O'Connor's a pretty funny guy. I mean, Larry O'Connor's got that.
No, but Andrew, it's worse than that, because and you and I are involved in politics and policy in the conservative movement. We have been for 20 years. I won't listen to WMAL again. I just won't listen to him. I'm a regular listener to Larry's show. I won't do it, because here's the thing: it's all fake. You can't talk about cancel culture and rail against it and talk about how demeaning it is to our public discourse, and then have someone be victim of it and then just move on, as And so I've talked about this with my own radio show. I would walk away before I would kneel to, you can't talk about this, don't mention that. And I would just walk away from it. And then I go to Regnery and I get a book deal and I'd write about it, and I go on a book tour and talk about it. I mean, so I look, I'm an Irish kid from the Bronx. I believe in hitting, and hitting hard. I believe in hitting until you win. And I would stay on this until there's some satisfaction. You decide what the satisfaction is, and I'm going to join. I'll talk about this forever now. I'll talk about it on Sunday on my radio show. I mean, I think this is, I think that you cannot, it's just, Andrew, what's the most important attribute in life? It's loyalty.
Yeah,
it's loyalty.
Loyalty, sticking to your guns.
It's loyalty. And here's the thing, Jordan, let me say one last thing. Jordan Peterson does this real good bit where he talks about when you're betrayed, and how if you're betrayed, it forces you to reconsider everything in connection with the people who betray you. It also forces you to do a self-examination on who's in your circle, who you trust to be, kind of arm in arm with you. And again, I don't mean to be over dramatic here, But man, I'd want to keep on punching and keep on hitting and keep on talking until there's an appropriate
Jerry,
satisfaction.
Isn't there a danger of punishing the folks who have been loyal to her in this? Right? I mean, I don't want to punish Larry O'Connor when Larry O'Connor is trying to do the right thing by helping Amber get her job back.
I don't know the background of it. But I tell you what, Andrew. You know, I told you several times that I would have gone into our program director and quit over your circumstance.
I most especially don't want to talk about that.
I know. Me either. Watch. I get canceled next.
But the point is, just to be real clear, Jerry and I had many a conversation about this. There is no confusion between what Jerry is talking about and Jerry's in my situation. Jerry is a brother to me, so I believe me. We've talked.
But you get my point. My point is that I would have gone. You know, I'd go to the edge. I mean, if I had to.
I know. The Just Us League. Believe me.
Amber.
Explain to
Amber. I invite you. I don't know you yet. Maybe there's something that we've called. A friend of ours who's in the business. Guy Shepard, who runs a site called Plan Man, he coined this years ago, the Just Us League, and that is a necessary small group that you could call, and they'll do anything for you. There's a scene in The Town, the movie The Town, where Ben Affleck's character goes in and says to his friend, "I need you to say yes. I need you to ask no questions, and I need you to do it right now." And his friend looks up at him and says, "Whose car are we taking?" And that's the Just Us League. It's no questions asked. Whose car are we taking? How are we going to get this done?
Amber, let me ask you this, because you know we're at this point. You've been off the air now for what, 6 weeks?
I guess that sounds about right. 5 or 6, I think.
5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, did you want to do, so like I always wanted to do talk radio since I was a teenager. I know Jerry's had it in his blood for a long time. You came to this after college. Have you gotten in your blood? You miss it? You want to keep doing it? You talk a little bit about that.
I definitely never thought that I'd be doing talk radio, and it kind of happened on accident, but I really enjoyed it. I really loved doing the show. I loved working with Larry and the other ladies, and really appreciated that growing up in this area, I could be on a station that, you know, people from my hometown listen to MAL, people I went to school with, and then like people that I was covering in the government were listening to it as well. So I thought that was really neat. And initially all I really wanted was my job back. Clearly that's not going to happen. I've publicly like shamed these people into oblivion. That's fine. I knew that was what the outcome was going to be when I went public. But look, like I don't know what I want to do. I'm finishing a book right now, and
there you go.
So I'm super busy anyway.
Amber, I'm also an editor at Real Clear Books and Culture. So happy to review the book or promote the book.
I already have a publisher, but promotion sounds good.
Yes.
And what's really ironic about it is I started writing it about 6 months ago. And the book is actually about, you guys are going to laugh, it's about the woke takeover of corporate media.
There you go. See?
So now I have to add a chapter.
Andrew, she stole my idea, Andrew, 6 months ago.
Listen, she beat us to the punch. So well, that's and obviously you're the Washington editor at the Spectator, which we love.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a great website, and you're doing great work there. Let's sort of shift gears a little bit here, because I mean here's the thing that I know. I'm going to say this. I do miss being on the air, having my weekly show and then doing the fill-in work that I did, because there's something to be said for when something pops up in the news, you want to be able to take it to the airwaves and have that take on it. You miss that, don't you?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I miss, interviewing local people who were involved in some of the stories and getting to know people. But I also, I've been kind of toying with this idea. I used to have this podcast called Unfit to Print. And
nice.
And after,
she's smarter than us.
New York Times slogan. And now it kind of has a double meaning because I'm literally unfit to air. But I don't know. I've had a couple of people ask me about it since I started talking about what happened this week. And I'm kind of toying with the idea of bringing it back after I finish writing the book. So that might be in the cards too. So we'll see. I don't know. I have a few things that I'm kind of playing around with.
What is the title of the book? Can you share that with us?
So tentatively, it's called The Snowflakes Revolt, the woke takeover of corporate media. So we'll see if that sticks, but so far that's
I
the
make
title.
the suggestion that whatever podcast you do, it has some kind of tie-in with the book title, because that will certainly offer that kind of synergy. I mean, for me, listen, I have an undergraduate degree in Russian studies. And so
by the way, he mentions every podcast.
Well, I do, but my point is only because
hey, I'm sorry. Where did you go to college again?
I went to William and Mary.
Oh,
Jerry.
that's right. Yes, that's
so, but the point is, my point is that for me to be on the sidelines in terms of terrestrial radio for the last almost 2 months now has been really hard to take. So we're doing other stuff here. I mean, any particular stories come to mind that you want to talk about that you haven't been able to talk about on the air?
Well, I just published a piece this morning at the Spectator, if we want to talk about it, about the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. But what I think so I have a theory, and I think that yes, a lot of these people are just like creepy pedophiles who want to sexualize children and groom them.
Listen, I read David French that we said that we can't be saying groomer or grooming. Right. So David French said so. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, my article kind of touches on that concept. And after being falsely smeared as a racist and fired for it, I'm not so worried about the feelings of people who are grooming children. But but I think there's another almost more insidious aspect to this, and like, bear with me, I'm going to lay out the theory,
please.
So it used to be that indoctrination of children kind of started at the college level, right? Like,
sure,
you send your kids off to school and they come home for Thanksgiving, and all of a sudden they're a blue-haired crazy person, and everyone in the family is suddenly racist, and like, you lose your kid.
Absolutely, yes.
But conservatives started exposing that scenario, and so the left has to keep going younger and younger with their indoctrination efforts, because the younger you can grab the kid, right, the more easy it is to brainwash them and kind of turn them against their parents. So here's what I think is happening. I think the critical race theory injection into the curriculums is meant to break down the children, challenge their identity. If you're like a white male child, for example, or a white female child, then you are inherently oppressive, right? You are marginalizing your classmates, and you're bad, and you need to feel guilty. Well, then the left comes in with the radical gender ideology. You can pick any of these 30 or 40 weird, like, anti-truth gender or sexual identities, and these are safe, good, happy identities. And if you're one of these, then you're on our side again. You're an ally, and you're a good person. So they break the children down, they build them back up with this weird radical gender and sex ideology. And then they turn them against their parents, because the parents are like, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't make any sense. This is weird. And the kid's like, well, you just don't get it because you're a bigot. You know, Mrs. Applebaum said that it's because you hate trans people and you're a transphobe. And I can't believe my own parent doesn't accept my identity. So the parents have two choices. They either accept the kid, and like, the kid becomes one of the little woke social justice warriors, or they risk losing the child but standing up for what's right. And you kind of get into this bad situation, and the kids kids who accept this paradigm are now already leftist warriors.
And you make a really good point here, and that is the parents are put in this very difficult spot where, what do you do? Do you stand for truth and in a loving way try to bring your child back, or do you just, and frankly, we have 5 children, my wife and I, and what I've noticed, and even in our more conservative circles, you know, we go to church on Sunday. I'm a trustee at the church. All my kids go to Catholic school, but even in that bubble, I've seen parents, I mean, more than sets of parents who are at this point, and they've asked us to pray. And they've said, Jerry, we you know, if I don't do this, we're going to lose her. Jerry, if we don't accept that, we're going to lose him. And there's this really tough spot. In fact, part of Lent this year, not to get overtly religious, but my wife and I have been praying together for these families. There is, and you're right, Amber, there is a targeting of our children, and this is purposeful.
Well,
and I think,
sorry, let me add to this, Jerry. I'm sorry, and you think? Let me let you finish your thought.
No, and I think this piece that you, and I haven't read it yet, and I'll put it up. If this is a cultural piece, I can put it. I'll put it up at Books and Culture. This is important. We have to warn parents. I've been saying, Andrew joked earlier in the program. I recently said on the radio, and I was taking a task for it, that I was being too extreme, but I don't think I am. And that is, I told, get your kids out of public schools now.
This is why I made the comment earlier.
Yeah. And I said, get them out. And I said, look, and I've challenged churches. I've had Lori on my program at WMAL, but I've talked to my own pastor and others, and that is, churches have to rally.
Yeah.
And if kids can't afford to get into a good private school, the churches have to step up with scholarships, or churches have to become pods for homeschooling. We can't give up here.
And let me add to this. I'm sorry to jump in, Amber, but the issue, what we're talking about here is sort of classic Marxist, Leninist, Hegelian, Maoist dialectic. I mean, you pick any of the major communist thinkers, and what they were instructing the movements to indoctrinate young people, to tear down the institutions of classic Western liberalism, classical liberalism, and to reinstitute them with these new radical beliefs, and to get the kids to sort of believe it, right? I mean, there's a reason why you had in the Stalinist era kids denouncing their parents. They were wholly brought in by the state.
The Cultural Revolution, Andrew.
The Cultural Revolution. At Mao as well. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, historically, like the destruction of the family for the left has been a convenient way to usher in the era of big government and reliance on and dependence on government rather than your communities or your families, and also has turned wokeness into the new religion.
Oh, yes. Amen. Yes.
So there's a big part of that involved too. Jerry, you said something that I really want to hit on. I completely forgot what it was, but there was an article that I read recently. I think it was in the Federalist. I wish I could remember who wrote it, but it was incredible because it was from this woman, a parent, whose child started to believe that they were transgender. And it was kind of this situation that you see a lot, and Abigail Schreier wrote about this in her book, about the young women who are becoming transgender, and it's like their entire friend group does it because it becomes this trendy thing.
It's contagion,
Right. So this woman's daughter was involved in this sort of friendship where she started to want to become a boy. And I can't remember the exact details, but basically this mom immediately pulled her daughter out of public school, put her in therapy with like someone with a religious background, started taking her to church. She took away her phone, her internet, and like basically almost isolated this girl. And a lot of people would look at that and say, well, that's abusive. Like, why aren't you just accepting of what your daughter feels? But within, I think, a few months, like 6 months, the daughter no longer believed that she was transgender. And it was just this outside influence that was really trying to like drive her into this.
I remember that story. Look, I saw this recently, and that is the World War II generation, less than 1% identified today what we would consider trans or the LGBTQ mindset. It was less than 1%. And then the baby boomers was a little less than 2%. The next generation was 4%. Next generation was 10. Today it's 20%. 20% of young people identify not as homosexual but just kind of on the spectrum of
queer.
And again, what they use, queer, exactly right. And this is something that is there's a contagion to it. It's your friends are doing it, and therefore we're doing it. And it's not necessarily even it's not about sexuality even. It really is about identity and about and you said this, and you're 100% right. It's a new religion. Yeah, I said this. I'll be real quick. I was at a media dinner recently, and Amber, we're going to put you on our salon list. We do these dinners on occasion, Real Clear Politics, where we bring in.
Yeah, I've been to one. They're great.
All right, very good. So maybe we've met. When was the last one? When was the last salon dinner you at?
I can't remember the woman's name, but she was like she had written a book about healthcare.
Yes.
I have the book on my shelf over here somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
I bet you I was there.
I've met
David.
DeRosier a few
Yeah,
times.
David.
Yeah.
Okay, David. Yeah, David's good.
Jerry,
David's a good guy.
Jerry doesn't wear his Under Armour t-shirts at the salon dinners.
No, I don't. Anyway, Dave and I have been friends for 20 years.
Okay.
He's a good guy. Anyway, anyway, we're at the most recent salon dinner. We had an after time, and we were having a glass of wine. It's very casual, and an anchor from a cable venue said to me, "What is up with you Republicans and don't say gay? Why do you want to force your religion on us?" And I looked at him and I said, "The bill is 7 pages. Did you read it?" He said, "No, I trust my colleagues and my staff and whatever else." And I said, "Look, I actually read the bill on air. And it's very simple what it does. Here's what it does." And our audience knows what it does because we talked about it a myriad times. But I said to him, I tell you what, I'm not going to convince you. You're not going to convince me. But why don't we find a neutral position? And that is this. I won't promote or work to promote biblical sexual ethics in public schools. That's religion, right? I won't promote the idea of a biblical marriage, one man, one woman forever. That's religion. Let's keep biblical sexual ethics out of the public schools. Can you agree to do the same thing with identity politics? Because it's a religion. So let's just be neutral. Let's teach kids how to read and write. Let's teach them history. Let's teach them science. And then let their parents and their mentors, and as they get older, they can make their own decisions here. I mean, and he didn't have much of a response, but I mean, I think that's a decent argument. Let's just call schools neutral. You know what I mean? Like when we were kids, we played tag. There was always like home base where you were protected.
Let me
Schools
ask you
like
this,
home
though.
base.
Jerry, I don't think I've asked you this question before. At least I don't think I did. And Amber, I'm going to ask this to you because I went back recently and was thinking about this. I could not tell you, with the exception of maybe you and I did talk about this last week, with the exception of my 3rd and 4th grade teacher, who was the same person because she changed grades that year. I could not tell you anything about the personal lives and the marital status or the dating status of just about any of my teachers from kindergarten through high school and sometimes even into college. But I mean, Jerry, did you ever know what?
Well, I was taught by a lot of brothers and nuns. Yes, so yeah, they're all married to Jesus. Yeah. So
yes,
yeah.
Okay.
No, but your point is, you're right.
Amber, what about
I did not know about the romantic life of my teachers.
Amber, what about you?
I mean, we would sometimes like speculate as a means of gossip, but the teachers would never tell us about their personal lives until maybe a couple of my high school teachers would be like, "Oh, me and my husband did this weekend," or whatever, but it was very mild. Definitely wasn't anything weird. And yeah, I mean, elementary school, middle school, if you like saw your teacher out in public doing real person things, it was weird. Like it was uncomfortable. Nobody liked the idea of their teacher having a personal life or like existing outside of school. So it's really weird to see these videos on like libs of TikTok where the teachers are like, "I'm coming out to my students today." I mean, that was just unheard of.
What? No.
I didn't
it's
even
funny.
know like the name of my teacher's spouse.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Never got there.
I was a freshman at Fordham, and it was St. Patrick's Day, and we took the subway down to Manhattan to go to the parade, and so we're on the platform. Andrew, you know this is like the D train going to Manhattan, right there at the Fordham station.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so I'm at the platform, and I'm looking over, and I see my 2nd grade teacher, Sister Ellen. Now, mind you, I'm now 19 years old, right? So I'm older, but even then, I was like, "Sister Ellen's out. What is she doing here? Oh my goodness!" And she came over and she recognized me and said, "Jerry, how are you?" And I was like, but it was the weirdest thing. Like even at 19, it was very bizarre to see Sister Ellen out and about.
Let me ask you this before we let you go, because I'm very cognizant of your schedule, and I appreciate you spending.
This has been great fun, Amber. Now that this has been great fun.
Before we let you go, though, because you are doing this great work for the Spectator, and we have been talking about this issue of journalism and journalistic ethics. we had the situation this week with the Chicago Thinker Conference. It's making its way around social media. Got these great questions to Ann Mayer. I'm not Ann Mayer, Ann Applebaum.
Ann Applebaum.
And I was horrified by her response because to me, and her response, the question was, how come you didn't do this? And she said, well, I didn't think that there was we don't think that there was anything, Hunter Biden is not.
It wasn't interesting to me. Figure. That's what she said.
Yes. Hunter Biden's not a public figure and it wasn't dispositive of the election. And to me, that is why I was horrified is because it was a huge abandonment of the whole concept of journalism as the fourth estate. Talk a little bit about the journalistic responsibility and this kind of truth seeking, as opposed to what we've been talking about, which is the advocacy journalism.
Yeah, well, you guys might have noticed over the past maybe 10 years, and I think it accelerated because of Trump, where journalists don't really talk about themselves as fact finder truth seekers anymore. Now it's all about standing up for the downtrodden, being a voice for the voiceless, speaking truth to power, those types of platitudes. And so there's like a fundamental shift in, I think, how journalists view themselves. And those latter statements really lend themselves to this advocacy journalism, as you mentioned, where they're more interested in protecting certain groups and elevating certain groups and making the other groups look bad. So like, we know how this plays out. The Democrats are the good guys, and all of their like special interest groups, whether it's the queer community or like people of color, those groups can never do any wrong. And then everybody else has to be put in that other category. And that's kind of how journalists have been viewing their role recently. And I thought that Ann Applebaum's response was very interesting because it illuminates this aspect of media bias that I've been talking about for a long time, which is it's not just how you cover stories, but it's what stories you choose to cover.
Yes.
And she made quite clear that they are not interested in covering stories that expose a certain class of people. Because I don't think that she just had this surface level understanding of the Hunter Biden laptop and was like, oh, it's about his personal life, nobody cares. I think she knew, I think all of them knew very well that there were hints of corruption in there with the emails about his business dealings. And they just obviously didn't want to have that microscope on the Biden family ahead of the election. So it's really telling. It's really revealing. I think journalists over the past 5 years especially have really exposed themselves for who they are. And I guess that's one positive aspect of all of this being laid to bear, is that people are really seeing journalists for what they are, and the trust in media has declined so much. And I think we should have trust in media if the media is good, but it's just not.
Amber, I want to just put a exclamation point on what you just said, and I talk about this all the time. We need a media that's respected, a media that is holding elected officials and corporate officials and others accountable. The challenge, the problem is, and you're right, over the last 15 years, look, the media has always had a bias. We know this, but regardless, there were ethics. There were, it started to break down. I think Dan Rather was the guy who really started who broke media when he just outwardly lied about George W. Bush, but it then accelerated during the Obama years. And you're right. Then Trump, it just went nuclear. But we do need, the three of us here, we're not bashing the media. We want a strong, independent media. Again, the challenge is that we don't have that right now.
Yeah, it's one of those things, right, where we're talking about this concept of journalistic ethics has been abandoned. And I think of two experiences, in my own background. One where a New York Times reporter solicited an interview with me under completely false pretenses, said he wanted to interview me about X, and then ambushed me with something else. And then an NPR story in which NPR did a story and didn't reach out to me for comment. It's not as though I'm a hard guy to find. And I had to really, I really, went to folks that I knew at NPR and said, hey, don't you guys have some kind of code of ethics? And they were like, yes. but sometimes people don't adhere to them. Amber, listen, you've given us more than an hour of your time.
Thank you.
How can folks find out where you are? How can folks follow you on Twitter? What do we need to do?
Yeah, so they can follow me on Twitter, where apparently I'm making very edgy jokes at Amber_Athey. And then also I would encourage people to subscribe to the Spectator. I have a promo code. It's just my name, Amber. Super easy. You can go to spectatorworld.com to subscribe. And I've been telling everybody to go there because the Spectator, when they got these emails from people complaining, they literally laughed at them and deleted them because they thought it was so patently absurd. I mean, that's the kind of outlet you want to work for.
Yes,
an outlet that defends its talent and laughs in the face of cancel culture.
Yes.
That's for free speech. So I would definitely encourage people to go to the Spectator and read some of my work there and subscribe if you like it.
Amber Athey, thank you so very much for joining us today. We hope to have you back soon.
That was great
Thanks,
fun,
guys.
Hey, listen, before you go though, I want to say this too. The Spectator, for our listeners, it is, I go to Real Clear Politics first thing I do in the morning, and the second thing is I go to the Spectator. So it's real good stuff. You got to get it.
There you go. All right.
Thanks.
And now it's time for the bottom line.
The bottom line.
Jerry, these episodes keep getting better, man. I mean,
Yeah,
there's no way to say this.
Here's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And that is Amber is going to be a policy star in the public discourse. I'm going to get her piece that she talked about, put it up on the Jerry Rogers Show page, and I'll also link to it at Real Clear Books. And I love that she's a fighter. We need more fighters.
But I'm telling you something, she's also funny. And I think I should have said this to her. She should be doing some kind of one woman. She should go on the lecture circuit and do some kind of, it's not stand-up per se, but she could make a mint going and doing presentations about all of this stuff and talking about cancel culture and doing these things. Yeah. So I'm glad we got in. There was something you wanted to talk about. We talked about the Hunter Biden laptop story. The bottom line with that, the bottom line with the Hunter laptop story is, and Jonah Goldberg, who was one of the voices around these salon dinners that Real Clear Politics puts on, he had to walk back his comments. Remember, he said yesterday or whenever, he was also filmed saying that it was ludicrous, or whatever word he used, to suggest that the Biden laptop story had anything to do with the election, only to be called out and said, well, if that's true, then why did everyone hide it? Of course it had an impact. And then he had to walk back, and what he said was, what he doesn't like, I guess, are these right-wing narratives. But the fact of the matter is, the media should have covered it. And it does matter. It does matter. Let's talk about this for 1 second. The whole concept of media journalism as the fourth estate is that they are supposed to represent a check on power insofar as they are they are looking at what's going on with these government officials. And they're doing this. I got into this years ago. Remember that weird guy, Barry Donadio, who was running for he was running for Orphans Court judge, and it was a whole thing. And all I wanted people to do was look at his record and look at what he was saying. And people were like, well, I don't need you to tell me what he's saying. I just, I'm going to just listen to what he has to say. I'm like, well, he's a politician. A politician's just going to tell you what they want to hear. The role of, I wasn't a journalist in that sense. I was just a guy.
Well, I mean,
no, here's my point. My point is that with regards to the Hunter Biden laptop story, the role of the journalist is to go and peer at what is in that story. Why? To make sure that the guy who's running for president of the United States isn't a crook and wasn't selling his office.
Right. And also the Federalist just did a good piece 2 days or 3 days ago this week, where 12 times when Joe Biden was connected to, knew about, and was shady with the Hunter Biden business deals. We know for a fact that the Biden family, including the then vice president, they benefited from these deals. And the American people had a right to know that.
This isn't like Billy Carter creating Billy Beer,
Billy
trying
Beer.
to create a name for himself by doing this.
I have a can of Billy Beer, by the
right,
way.
it would be one thing, I have a cousin who used to have a can of Billy Beer.
Yeah.
But the point is, if maybe if Hunter Biden wasn't traveling on Air Force Two to go and make some of these trips, and doing business while his dad was traveling overseas, maybe, just maybe, we might think that there was no story here.
Right.
But the fact that he is, and the fact that there is this interplay, right? I used to spend a lot of time during the FBI 2016 election scandal talking about the timeline. Maybe if there wasn't this weird coincidence of Hunter Biden being hired by folks in Ukraine at the same time Ukraine is trying to get U.S. interest by the federal government in what's going on in their country, what's going on in their borders, maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't be concerned. Look,
there's not a lot of data from 2020 in terms of if that story wasn't spiked, what impact it would have had. However, we do know two things. We know that there was a purpose, a reason why the media hid the story, because the media believed it would have an impact on the election. Absolutely. We know that. And secondly, there is that one polling company, and the name escapes me now. I want to say MRC or there is a polling company that did a post-election analysis and found that 16% of Biden voters would not have voted for Joe Biden if they had known about the Hunter Biden laptop story. And so again, talk about fixing elections. I know that the left hates to talk about the big lie, Trump saying that it was stolen. But the fact is that there was so much fortification around the election, high-tech social media companies, corporations, and others, that the 2020 election really should be given a second set of eyes. It was an attempt by the elites to undermine and push out a sitting president. And you can think what you want about Trump.
Jerry, who could do that kind of an analysis where and we're talking about everything.
I tell you who could do it, and that is these never Trumpers who at once had great gravitas with the mainstream Republican conservative movement. I think David French, who I think is a decent and good man, could do that analysis. I think Jonah Goldberg could do that.
But the problem with somebody like a Jonah Goldberg is now they've created this industry, right? Where
so they'd have to step away from a paycheck, so to speak.
Well, they'd have to put their industry at risk in order to maybe perhaps regain some of that gravitas. I mean, it gets into exactly what we were talking about with Amber, which is, you look at it in one way, right? You look at your Cumulus and you look at her tweet and you say, oh my God, it's doing reputational damage. And this is going to hurt our bottom line, without realizing that when you turf her, when you fire her, it actually does hurt your bottom line. Right.
So, and again, I'll say this again, because you mentioned it. I can't take seriously any segment on WMAL right now that, again, they might have syndication that I'm not aware of. Like, I think Mark Levin might be on that program. So I'm not talking about Mark Levin, but the local hosts who are doing shows on that on WMAL. Why should I believe anything they have to say that they're being sincere about cancel culture or any of the rest of it? Why?
Because Jerry, in the end, right, we live in the real world, and in the real world, I don't know what deal Larry O'Connor has, my friend Larry O'Connor has in his contract, or Chris Plant has in his contract, to protect him in case he does something on the order of what
you make a good point, and I understand your point, but
so they may have more courage. But it's a situation, right?
No, you missed my point though.
Yeah.
My point is that in today's culture, if you make a living in the public discourse, the very worst charge is misogyny or racism.
Racism, yeah.
And Amber has been fired for being a racist.
Yes, I understand this, and I believe that they have spoken out about this. As you and I have talked about, I can think of only one person in media on air who has ever quit in solidarity of something that has happened to a colleague.
Really?
You know, that's Rick Amato at One America News, who quit over what was happening with one of his producers. At least that's the way I understand the story. And so as much as I would like, I don't begrudge somebody when they are sort of dealing with when they have to protect their phony baloney jobs. I don't know.
But
what
imagine
kind
this.
of,
Let's just play.
But also, Jerry, as I said, given the conversations, and I don't want to talk. I not only do I not want to, I don't think I can. But keeping in mind that you and I have had these conversations where it has been very, very clear that
yeah.
But
so, play this. Just play this in your head for a second. Imagine if the talent at WMAL, in solidarity, did not go back on the air until there was some kind of recompense with Amber.
But see, I'm not again, now that I understand that they are all right, because we have this conversation offline. I understand that WMAL is a union shop. They may not be able to walk out like this in the same way.
Okay.
So
look, our listeners are asking that question.
But my point is, at the very least, unlike other situations that I will not talk about, at least the other hosts on that station have been publicly vocal about their concern about Amber being fired.
There was a recent incident,
right? Because I know of other situations in which hosts have lost their job and other people at the station have said diddly squat.
Right, but this is different in the sense the charge is racist tweet, and that kind of brings it to a different level. I'll say this.
No, but I agree with you. But I would argue it goes the other way. If someone loses their job because of some kind of a tiff with management that has nothing to do with anything untoward that they might have said on the air.
That's different. That's different, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, but to me, there's no. It takes much less courage to speak out either internally or even or God forbid externally.
Look, here's an example, right? If the manager of the New York Yankees was tweeted something out and some cancel culture mob said it was racist, or there was a Me Too claim, but he was obviously innocent and he was fired, though. What if the entire baseball team refused to take the field? And they would have to confront the issue then. Here's my point. My point is that in many of these instances, I'm not sure if Amber's situation applies here, but let me just make this broad point. If people would just stand up to the mob,
yes,
I think the mob would back down.
But,
and no one has stood up.
Well,
we're not standing up.
Well, I mean, they're not. Okay, I think that there are degrees of standing up. I applaud the other hosts for actually saying something publicly, because again, there are situations in which
do you know that they said something publicly?
I do, yeah, and yes, and in fact, I was surprised. I was surprised that they had, and pleased that they had.
All right, yeah.
But but again, there are degrees. Jerry, listen, we've gone a very long time today.
I know. I'm sorry.
And with very good reason. You've got a show on Sunday.
Yeah, and it's Palm Sunday, so we're going to have a special Palm Sunday show on WBAL, and then of course the following Sunday is Easter Sunday, and it's my birthday, so that'll be a very special show as well. I tell you what, I mean, I make a lot of jokes about the public discourse and being on the air and what we do here, but it really is a privilege to be able to discuss these ideas with our audience, and I don't take it for granted. But I am tired. I'm tired of good people being bullied, good people being fired and canceled, and I wish that, and my prayer is that good people would begin to stand up to the mob. I think if we stand up, a bully in my entire life. I'll tell one quick story, and then I'll let you sign off. When I was in 7th grade, I was bullied. There was we came from a grammar school to a middle school. It was public school, And I had gone to Catholic school for most of my life, and I'm in 7th grade. And for some reason, this 8th grader would hassle me. He would book time me. Remember book timing, where you have all your books and they come behind you and they smash you and push you and your books all over the place. And
never happened to me, but I know.
Anyway, but I mean, for school started, and every day this was happening. And it got to the point where I didn't want to go to school. I had this horrible sinking feeling, these butterflies.
Anxiety.
Right. And my father finally said, "What is up with you?" And I told him what happened. And he said, "Jerry, go and punch him right in the mouth." And I was like, "I can do that?" He's like, "Do it." I said, "Well, I'll get in trouble." He said, "No, you won't." He said, "You go the next time he does that." And what I did, the next time he did it, I turned around in front of the assistant principal and I broke his nose. I smashed him and busted up his nose. And I was never bullied after that ever again. Anywhere I went. My point is, we need that moment in our culture where good people bloody the mob.
Well, I mean, but there's that, and also, kudos.
And I mean that figuratively, not literally.
No. Yeah, I understand. Yes, very, very important point.
Yes.
But that's kudos to the Spectator for standing up for it. Not that.
Yes. But Jerry, and everyone here should become subscribers to the Spectator. The Spectator.
Your discount code Amber.
And remember, it's not the American Spectator. It's Spectator USA, Spectator World. Yeah,
that's right. So Jerry, just because what you're talking about here is speaking the truth and planting your feet, isn't it?
Yes. And find the truth, plant your feet, stand firm.
There you go.
God bless you.
Have a great week, everybody. Have fun and stay safe.